All right, so we had fun today. We got to build an RC track and ran the cars around out there for a little bit. I got to run my fifth scale around the track for quite a while today, and something happened with the steering servo. I got to get a new steering servo. I don't know whether I hit a bump too hard or something out there, but the steering servo locked up. So I called the hobby shop. They've got a steering servo, but I just don't have time running there tonight to get it. So I think we're done with the RC stuff for today, but we had a good time. But now it's time to get back on street racing stuff. I think they're going to have a little Sunday service tomorrow here in Ohio, and Billy wants to put the truck back on methanol before we go down there. So tonight I'm going to do a little detailed video on switching the carburetor from E85 back to methanol. So here we go. We'll get this underway. It's got what, about 5 gallons of E85 left in it?
Yeah, if that.
All right. So what we're going to do, this is what we did not do the other day that we should have done. What he's doing is he's got the return line back to the tank in a 5-gallon jug. The problem is he turned the pump on the other day and was draining the tank down, but the engine wasn't running. And the problem is with a carb hat, if a booster dribbles or if a needle and seat doesn't quite seal up, which is common when we run high fuel pressure like what we do, the booster will dribble and it'll fill one cylinder or maybe all the cylinders with fuel. And that's how we caught on fire. We pulled the spark plugs out and the coil was still active, and the coil lit the fuel on fire, and that's a whole big mess. So what we're going to do is go ahead and fire this thing up and let it run while we're draining it. So the first thing I'm going to do, since it's been cold today, is I'm going to pull this vacuum line off this. It takes 2 hands though. I'm going to pull this vacuum line off of the blow-off valve that goes down here to this little tank and shoot a little bit of ether in that line. Out of fuel?
Yeah.
Okay, so the tank's dry. Got all the fuel out of the tank. We ran the carburetor dry. And now we're gonna go ahead and pull the bowls off, and we're gonna set to switching these metering blocks out and transferring the boost reference power valves from the E85 blocks to the methanol blocks, I should say. So the first thing we're gonna do is remove the 4 bowl screws. Takes a 5/16 nut driver. Take these 4 bowl screws out, and the front bowl drops off, and then the metering block is right there where we can get to it. Pull all 4 screws out. Okay. A little bit of fuel left in it. Okay, there's our E85 metering block. Is remove this boost reference power valve. Get out our handy shitbox supply billet aluminum monkey wrench. Loosen it. You want to make sure you save your O-ring there. There's the E85 block. Here is our methanol blocks. Now, methanol is kind of tricky. You have to really be careful when you've had a methanol metering block laying out, let the air get to it, that you make sure there's not any white, pasty, crusty stuff anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and take some brake clean and blow the passages out in this. And you'll see here, this is some custom shiznitzery that I've done, but you can see how large the power valve channel restrictors are drilled out in the ethanol metering block. See how big those holes are? One is just the top one there is always open, and the bottom ones had little screw-in bleeds to finally meter the trim, the very last little bit of fuel that you're trying to run through the power valve channel restrictor. And as you can see, both of them have been drilled out pretty dramatically. And we'll compare that to the E85 metering block. See how much smaller the power valve channel restrictor passages are in the E85 block compared to the methanol. Put them up here side by side. Big difference. That represents how much of a difference there is between flowing the proper amount of ethanol and the proper amount of methanol. It is substantial. So what you want to do is make sure that your O-ring is centered on the power valve when you screw the power valve into the metering block, which happens to be tricky this time. Center it up. And when you tighten these, you don't want to over tighten them. You just want to snug them up with your fingers, and then just like a little bit of a little extra turn with an aluminum wrench. That's all it takes. You don't need to crank those down real hard. If you crank them down real hard, you tend to break the power valves. So that's it. Front's ready to go back. Power valve installed. Both gaskets are on. Metering block's clean. We'll just go ahead and set the block up there, and there's guide pins in the metering block that line up in the main body right there. You feel it when it goes all the way in. And then you just take your bowl. You have to make sure that your accelerator pump over here and the accelerator pump arm are lined up where they need to be. Just like that. When everything's lined up, the screws will go right in. We just snug up bowl screws. You don't need to crank these down real hard, guys. You just, all you're going to do is if you start cranking them down real hard, you just strip the threads out of the main body. No need to do that. Just snug them by hand. That's it. Front's done. Now all I got to do is do the back. On the back, I have to use a ratchet instead of the nut driver because there's not enough room for the nut driver in the back. Once you get all these broke loose good, it should come right apart. And then there's your secondary block. You can see it's got jet extensions in the back, and the rear power valve has the extension as well to make sure that the power valve is always fed fuel even under hard acceleration. Move our power valve. And the power valve screws right into the methanol block. Let me clean it out real quick. Now, you'll notice here in a second as I show you this, that the power valve channel restrictors in the rear metering block are not nearly as big as they are in the front. The reason for that is because I run a much larger jet in the back. You can see how big those jets are. They're 185 thousandths orifice. We run 185 thousandths orifice jet in the rear and a 135 thousandths jet in the front. That way, when Billy does his burnout, the carburetor doesn't run extremely rich at part throttle, and I run the power valve in the front turned in quite a ways to keep the power valve from opening with less than 5 pounds of boost. That way he can do a nice clean burnout, and it doesn't run overly rich and spit and sputter. Now, I'm not really happy about that. See, I've got this, it's tight, and I don't dare tighten it any more than that, but that leg it's kind of in there on an angle. I'm not sure if I can turn it. I can't turn it back far enough to get that where I want it. That's where I need it. Now, unfortunately, there, I got it that time. Unfortunately, I don't have any more of the O-rings, and I'm just using standard Holley power valve gaskets. But these come with an O-ring instead of the standard gasket that make it a lot easier to tighten that up and get it right where you need it. We got it that time. All right, this one's ready to go. So once again, we just put our metering block on there. You can feel that the dowel pins engage the main body. It's nice and tight, it's snug. Shove our bowl screws back a little bit. There it is. Just tighten up those bowl screws. And that's it. We're ready to put methanol in the tank and fire it up. All right, now what I want you to do is just go ahead and put just a splash in there, not a whole 5-gallon jug, because there's still going to be E85 in the fuel lines and a little bit of residual in the tank. We want to fire it up and run that stuff out and then put meth in it. Go ahead and put a little more in there. Just don't put the whole can in it. That's good. Now, when you go to start it, just hit the fuel pump just long enough to put fuel in the carburetor and then start it. Turn the fuel pump back off until it's running. Good? Okay, fire it up. So we got it fired up on methanol. We got 180 degrees water temperature in it. Had to lean out open. Everything seems good. So we only put just a splash of methanol in it because I wanted it to burn out little traces of E85 that were still in the fuel system. So we'll flush that out. Now we'll go ahead and top the tank off with methanol. We'll probably go ahead and set the trans brake and make sure it comes up on boost. And as long as that all checks out, I think we're good to go. All right, we've topped the fuel cell off. He's gonna fire it up. We'll see if we can't put it on the brake. Just make sure it doesn't stumble, make sure everything's okay. Good? Were you testing the bump there? Is that what you were doing? Okay. So that's that. It's on meth. That's all it takes to switch it from E85 to meth and back and forth. The main thing you got to be careful of, guys, is when you're switching fuels, or if you've run the carburetor clear dry, really anytime you turn an electric fuel pump on, especially a big one like this is a brushless 10.0 aeromotive pump. It's very important that you never let the pump run consistently, like more than a second or two, without the engine running, because that pump is so huge and it pushes so much fuel that if a needle and seat should happen to hang open or a float malfunctions for whatever reason, you'll fill the engine full of fuel. Okay, so that's the biggest danger with a carburetor, is just making sure that when you turn that fuel pump on, that you don't leave it on for very long, and then you only have it running when the engine's running. And even when you do turn the pump on, you should turn the pump on, off, on. And that helps if there's a little bit of dirt or a little crud or something in a needle and seat. That'll blast that crud out of there, and then it should seal. So just a few helpful tips and tricks from some hard lessons that I've learned over the years. All right, so Junior wants to go ahead and make a test hit tonight and scuff these tires. They're brand new Hoosiers. They're 28 by 10 C06s. And as anybody that's had Hoosiers know, they've got these little rubber teddies on them that takes one or two burnouts and a little bit of drive time to get those off. And it's important that you get those off before you make your first round call first thing tomorrow morning. So he's going to top off the fuel cell. He's setting tire pressure right now. I'm going to grab a jug of stripper glitter and we're going to head out to our test spot and make a test hit and see what it goes. So we're just about ready to go. Billy's got the front shocks adjusted, and I think he's going to... Are you uploading another tune to the ignition? Okay. So he's going to check the tune in the ignition system, see what the two-step set at, and the launch retard and all that. Just kind of going to go over it and make sure it'll go down the road. It's good to get this stuff out of the way and check this stuff before you are at the race spot, surrounded by lots of people that want to talk and ask questions and things of that nature. So we always try and do this stuff the night before. Just try to run through everything, make sure everything that we're about to do tomorrow morning is going to be okay. All right, tell me about it.
So I turned it up a little bit on the launch from what I normally would, just to see if those tires would do any better. Because I know, before, the other set of Hoosiers on the C07s, they had a little bit of wheel speed, but they weren't too bad. These, I actually turned it up 100 RPM and let it leave a little harder, built more boost, and it took it. And it started to gain a little wheel speed at like 100 to 200 feet, but it caught it, and I felt it grab, like maybe 250 feet out. It really grabbed hard and just took off. It was a good pass. It went 591, and I was on the brakes at probably 600 feet, and it went 591 at 128.9. So it was at least 133, 134 mile an hour, and it really isn't even on that much boost. It's only on like 17 pounds.
So when you made that 588 at 132 the other day, if you would have taken a 60 foot and a 330 from this run and put it on that 588 run, what do you think it would have gone? 580, 579?
Well, the 330 was within 100th this run from that run, so they're pretty similar. I think if it had 132 mile an hour, and if I wouldn't have let out early, I think it would have been probably a 587, 585 right in there.
So, real quick, that road was dirty. Like it was clean. When we made that 588 at 132, that was a clean road. They're out there picking corn tonight, and you had to pull way up.
Pull way ahead because there was marks in the road where they had been turning the tractors around in the road.
There was corn shocks and dirt and mud and everything else all over the road up there.
I thought it was fairly decent once we got up that far, but I don't know. I did a really good burnout. Those tires were brand new, so I tried to do a really hot burnout, and it sounded really good in the burnout. Those tires, I'm a believer in them for virgin road stuff. They work.
Carburetor feel okay?
Carburetor feels good.
No trouble.
No trouble. So this is our last run. It was 591.
This is tonight, just now.
But as you can see, this blue line here, that's my mile an hour, and then the yellow line is the G's. The Draggy doesn't have the most accurate G meter, but it will tell you for sure when you're out of the gas, and you can see it drops off, well before the end of the run, and it actually goes negative, so it's like almost down to 0 G's. It was headed for probably 133, 134 miles an hour. Probably would have been a 585.
Not bad.
Not bad. I mean, you can see 43 degrees outside. One burnout on a dirty road on a 10-inch tire, not even a 10.5-inch tire, a 10-inch tire. Actually, if you measure the tread width, they're 9.5. But I think I'm a believer in that compound and that sidewall for a virgin road.
How much air did you have in them?
When I left the shop, I set them at 10 1/4. I figured by the time I did my burnout, they were probably about 11 1/4.
Why don't you check them real quick?
Usually they're about a pound. We're almost 12 now.
That's what I figured.
They're right below 12 now. When I did my pass, they were probably